Inspiring Philosophy did a video about what he thinks is the worst atheist argument ever.
When theists argue from cosmological or contingency arguments that God created the universe, the worst reply a skeptic can make is,
who created God?
What created God?
This is not the best way of formulating this objection. A better way of putting this question is,
why does God exist instead of not existing?
Or another way the question is formulated is, why is there something instead of nothing? And I see no reason why that question cannot be extended to God.
My favorite cosmological argument, the Leibnizian version, makes this distinction very clear. Anything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external explanation.
IP sees God as existing necessarily, but I think it does make sense to ask, if God can exist necessarily, why can't the universe? The Kalam argument says that the universe can't exist by necessity because the universe had a beginning, and if it had a beginning, it came into existence and therefore is contingent. However, this depends on the A theory of time being true, and the theory of relativity seems to show it isn't. I have another video explaining that further. There is good reason to believe that it is not, in fact, the case that everything which begins to exist is contingent.
So again, just because some things like the universe have an external cause, that doesn't mean everything that exists must also have a cause. God would be by definition of the first category, a being who doesn't need an external cause and is necessary.
For something to exist by logical necessity, however, it would need to be impossible to imagine its non-existence. The idea of its non-existence would have to be incoherent. Imagining God's non-existence is actually quite easy, therefore God is not logically necessary. Johanan Raatz disagrees. He believes in idealism, and that idealism means atheism is incoherent.
Consciousness, in turn, entails the hard problem and the interaction problem, which entail idealism and thus God. So, of course, atheism is incoherent.
Even if you assume that idealism, the idea that only mental phenomena exist, is true, idealism does not entail God, because a variety of idealism is solipsism. Even Raatz seems to believe that solipsism is conceivable.
You can conceive, now that's not to say that it's true or anything, but you can conceive that the world is solipsist, correct?
But if solipsism is conceivable, then God can't exist by logical necessity, because solipsism is the idea that only oneself exists, without other minds and without God. If solipsism is coherent, atheism is coherent.
Why can't we just say the universe is necessary? Well, this was a prevalent belief of atheists before the 20th century, but the observable data in cosmology and physics has strongly refuted this possibility. An overwhelming amount of evidence now shows our space-time is contingent and had a beginning.
It may show that it had a beginning, but that doesn't show that it is contingent. I think the universe is contingent, but the fact that it is finite in the past doesn't prove its contingency. Because the idea that everything which begins to exist has a cause is predicated on the A theory of time, which doesn't seem reconcilable with relativity. I think the universe is contingent, at least logically contingent, because I think the idea of the universe not existing is a coherent one. I don't think there's anything logically contradictory about it. But since that's the case, God is at least as contingent as the universe, because I can imagine God not existing a lot more easily than I can imagine the universe not existing. So given that God is contingent, why does God exist instead of not existing?